a little girl came running, shaking, breathless. Our Quraysh brother, two men came and took him away. They were wearing white clothes. They laid him down, they opened his chest and put their hands inside. Halimah and her husband ran to find the boy, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just to find the young boy. And he was a very small boy at that time. When they reached him, nothing seemed to be wrong. No blood, no wound, just a change of facial expression of the little boy. She asked him, "What happened to you, dear boy?" And the boy answered, "Two men in white came and they laid me down. They opened my chest and took something out of it, but I don't know what it was." They searched around. Immediately, no one was there. No cuts, no blood. And when they checked him closely, there was a mark on his shoulder, one that hadn't been there before. The mark that would come to be known as Khatam an-Nubuwwah, the Seal of Prophethood. To understand what led to this moment and what happened after, let's go back to where we left off in the previous episode. Halimah radiallahu anha described what life was like after she took the newborn Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam into her home. She says, "Our baby entered the hut. Unexplainable pleasure. The arrival of baby Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought blessings to all. Once barren land turned green. There was abundant grazing for the animals, and their udder was always full, even when the neighboring animals had none. Neighbors began to say, 'Let's graze our animals where Halimah's animals are grazing.' She nursed him until he was 2 years old, and by then it was time to return the baby back to mother Amina radiallahu anha. And Halimah's family couldn't bear to part way with the little boy. Coincidentally, at that time, a plague broken out in Makkah, and with Halimah's insistence, Amina radiallahu anha reluctantly agreed to let her son stay with Halimah radiallahu anha for a little longer. Months passed peacefully. One day, Halimah's own little girl Shaima and boy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were playing in the backyard of the house. And that's when the little girl Shaima came running, shaking, with the story of two men in white laying down the little boy and opening the chest, putting their hands inside. That was the day everything changed. The mark on his shoulder was small, about the size of a pigeon's egg, with a light covering of hair as described in the hadith. It would later be known as Khatam an-Nubuwwah, the Seal of Prophethood. Halimah and her husband were shaken. They decided it was time to take the boy back to Makkah and tell his mother about everything that has happened. There was another layer to this. People of scriptures had already begun to recognize the signs. Word was starting to spread that this child was destined to be a future prophet. Some among the Jews of that time had already begun regarding this little boy with hostility. Sensing what was coming, Halimah radiallahu anha went to Makkah with the boy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when she reached Amina radiallahu anha, she told everything. Amina radiallahu anha showed no fear. She simply said, "Great honors are waiting for my son." She even shared her own miraculous experience from the pregnancy. Halimah radiallahu anha felt relieved, and then she requested if she can take the boy back to her home. But this time, Amina radiallahu anha said no. It was time for him to stay with his mother. The next 3 years was spent under the care of Amina radiallahu anha, surrounded by the family, including Hamza and Sophia, the children of Abdul-Muttalib, who became close companions of young Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdul-Muttalib had a special seat by the Kaaba no child was permitted to sit in there except little boy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When people questioned it, the grandfather Abdul-Muttalib simply said, "I see many wonders in this child." And when he turned 6 years old, Amina radiallahu anha decided to take him on a journey to visit family in Yathrib, along with her son and a caretaker, Umm Ayman, who's also called Barakah. They set out. They visited the graveyard of his father Abdullah radiallahu anh, and the young boy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made memories there he would carry for the life, swimming in the pool, flying kite with the local children. On the journey back to Makkah, Amina radiallahu anha fell seriously ill. They stopped to rest in a place called Abwa. Her condition worsened, and there Amina radiallahu anha passes away. His father had passed away before he was even born. Now at the age of 6, young boy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had lost his mother too. He was a complete orphan. Her final words to him were, "My dear son, I'm leaving this world. I'm departing, and I'm leaving behind many good legacies. The dream I had will come true. If so, my son is a future prophet for all mankind," she said, and then she kissed him and she entrusted him to the hands of Barakah, and then he took her last breath. Ayman would go on to live an extraordinary life. She cared for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through childhood, adolescence, and even the adulthood. She witnessed his prophethood and his mission firsthand, and she embraced Islam early. Later, during her journey to Medina, she was lost in the desert without water until, as the Prophet ﷺ described in a hadith, a bucket descended from the sky. She drank until she was satisfied, and she never experienced thirst again for the rest of her life. That was Barakah. Prophet ﷺ personally gave the glad tidings of paradise to Barakah. But that day at Abwa, none of that had happened yet. There was only a 6-year-old boy bidding farewell to his mother. Decades later, even at 60 years old, when Prophet ﷺ returned to Abwa with his companions, he wept there again. The grief of that day never fully left him. Barakah and the little boy continued their journey to Makkah, where his grandfather Abdul-Muttalib was waiting. Abdul-Muttalib made a quiet resolution. This child would never feel the absence of his parents. He kept him close always. He wouldn't eat without him nearby. He wouldn't rest easy if the boy was out of his sight. Once, unable to find him, he told Ayman urgently, "Ayman, don't overlook my grandson. I saw him standing in the Seerah tree with the other children." Talking about Abdul-Muttalib himself, he was a respected leader in Makkah, and visitors would come from distant land to see him, including scholars and priests. At multiple occasions, they noticed something in his grandson. They would speak of the coming final prophet and describe the signs that recognized in the boy. Each time, Abdul-Muttalib would proudly draw his grandson close. One day, a group of scholars arrived from Najran. What they saw in that child would leave them stunned, and it wasn't a last time a stranger would recognize at a glance who this boy was destined to become. We'll see that in the next episode. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad.